Okay, welcome back to Fearen Fear Files, where we question everything and we look for the answers to everything, and we also search for the truth. But listen, I know I just had this problem earlier, so I'm coming back with part two of this. It's only probably about 30 to 45 more minutes left of this episode, but it's real good. I'm here in Memphis, so I can tell you things about this city that you don't know. And this city never sleeps. It's a magnet. It never sleeps. It stays woke. But we finna get back to it. I was finishing up on the Shandrika part, but we're gonna skip on over to what happened with his mother that caught this guy up in her bed. But we're gonna skip on to that right now. So let's get to it.
$100,000, that's the bond for a Southwest Memphis woman accused of fatally shooting a man allegedly found hiding under her juvenile daughter's bed. Kendra Scott was in court today to face a charge of first-degree murder for the death of Rodarius Morton. Braille Brown spoke with Scott's attorneys about their confidence in representing her.
Kendra Scott has left jail after posting her $100,000 bond, but her real legal danger has only intensified. Her next court appearance comes August 3rd. And prosecutors still accuse her of first-degree murder. This case has moved beyond the shocking headline into a fight over what Scott intended that night. Her attorneys signal their strategy, believing the state faces a serious problem proving premeditation. Defense attorney Blake Ballin called the situation every parent's worst nightmare and questioned whether anyone could think calmly. He said, "One of the key questions in this case will be whether anyone could act rationally in this circumstance." Yet prosecutors possess two details that could transform panic into murder under Tennessee law. Morton reportedly took a bullet to the back of his head after leaving the bedroom. Scott's daughter also described an alleged warning her mother made before that night. Those details do not prove guilt, but explain the first-degree murder charge. Next, you will learn what Scott's release changes and what the bond leaves completely untouched. Then we will test 5 facts that could decide whether a jury sees protection, punishment, or premeditation. Scott may sleep at home, but carries conditions, public scrutiny, and prosecutors who will use her own words. The latest update gives her freedom while the court waits, yet freedom cannot answer the question hanging over everything. Did the judge's bond decision signal weakness in the murder case, or simply protect Scott's rights before trial? To answer that, you must separate what the courtroom actually changed from what the evidence still threatens to prove. The bond decision changes is one immediate fact. Scott no longer waits for court in jail. Court records show she posted bail 2 days after the July 20 bond decision. That release gives her attorneys more preparation time and a chance to build their defense outside custody. It does not erase either charge, weaken the affidavit, or predict what prosecutors may present on August 3rd. A bond hearing asks whether conditions can manage risk before trial, not whether the defendant deserves conviction. So when you see Scott leaving jail, do not confuse temporary freedom with legal victory. The judge also ordered Scott to avoid Morton's family while the case moves forward. That restriction protects both sides and reduces the chance of contact before witnesses testify. Ballin has attacked the state's charge, especially its claim that Scott formed a premeditated intent to kill. He argued that prosecutors expect rational behavior from someone confronting what he called a parent's worst nightmare. His defense can use fear, confusion, and sudden discovery to challenge any claim of calm reflection. However, prosecutors do not need the bond hearing to reveal every piece of evidence they possess. They can preserve surveillance footage, forensic testing, phone records, and witness interviews for later proceedings. Scott's attorneys say they still await doorbell video and the autopsy findings. Those materials could show Morton's direction, Scott's position, their distance, and whether anyone moved before the shot. The truth is simple. The $100,000 bond changes Scott's location, not the evidence confronting her. Courts presume Scott innocent, yet first-degree murder exposes her to Tennessee's harshest criminal consequences. The next hearing may clarify scheduling, evidence access, or the defense's direction, but it will not settle guilt. That leaves one brutal physical fact at the case's center. Police found Morton outside with a gunshot wound to the back of his head. You now understand what the courtroom changed, but the evidence asks a far more dangerous question. What must prosecutors prove before that wound becomes evidence of murder, rather than a terrified mother's split-second decision? Tennessee law does not ask whether Scott felt angry, frightened, or protective. It asks whether she reasonably believed deadly force was immediately necessary against death, serious injury, or grave sexual abuse. The law can remove a duty to retreat, but it does not create permission to shoot every unwanted visitor. Now consider the 5 facts a jury may weigh when testing that belief under Tennessee's current self-defense standard. First, Scott reportedly discovered Morton under her 13-year-old daughter's bed before dawn. That discovery supports fear because Scott did not know his identity or intentions. Second, the juvenile reportedly invited Morton inside, complicating claims that he forcibly entered. An invitation does not settle his status, but prosecutors can use it against an intrusion narrative. Third, the affidavit describes Morton gathering his belongings and moving toward the front porch. That movement may support the state's argument that any immediate threat had started disappearing. Fourth, police found a wound to the back of Morton's head. That location matters, but it cannot reveal distance, body position, movement, or the exact bullet trajectory. Fifth, the affidavit describes no threat, attack, or weapon from Morton. Self-defense trainer Buddy Smith highlighted that absence. He said, "The affidavit does not allege that he threatened the mother or anyone else at that time." Here lies the central conflict. Scott's strongest defense begins with the bedroom discovery, but her greatest danger begins outside it. Prosecutors can argue that fear turned into punishment once Morton crossed the doorway and moved away. The defense can answer that Scott faced seconds, not hindsight, while assessing an unknown adult near her child. A jury must judge what she reasonably perceived then, not merely what you and I know now. However, first-degree murder demands more than an unjustified shooting. Prosecutors must show an intentional killing with premeditation, meaning Scott formed the decision before she fired. That decision need not exist for hours, but the state must prove reflection rather than uncontrolled impulse. When Morton moved outside, did the threat end, or could Scott still reasonably fear for her daughter? Your answer may change after you hear what the juvenile says Scott threatened before Morton ever arrived. The juvenile's statement gives prosecutors a path toward proving Scott considered violence beforehand. The affidavit says Scott previously warned what she would do after finding a boy inside. The juvenile attributed these words to her mother, "I will put a hole in his ass." That statement may sound exaggerated, but prosecutors can present it as evidence of an earlier decision. They can argue that Scott did not invent lethal force during panic because she had already described that response. The defense will attack that interpretation from every direction. Scott did not name Morton, set a date, or describe a specific plan in that warning. Ballin can argue that frustrated parents use reckless language without genuinely intending to kill. He can insist that an earlier statement cannot explain Scott's fear during an unexpected discovery. Still, the wording matches the situation prosecutors describe, which makes it deeply unsettling. Like this video if you want case analysis that separates emotional reactions from evidence. Morton's former teacher, Robin Perkins, has also added a painful human layer to the public debate. Perkins described Morton as having special needs and said viewers never knew the student she taught. She also refused to excuse his alleged contact with a 13-year-old child. Perkins said, "I do not condone his actions of going and mingling with a 13-year-old. Her account cannot establish Morton's diagnosis, intentions, or what Scott knew during the confrontation." However, it reminds you that viral headlines often flatten everyone into simple heroes and villains. Scott can appear protective without gaining automatic legal justification. Morton can make a disturbing decision without surrendering every protection the law provides. Does Scott's alleged warning prove premeditation, or does it sound like reckless parental anger? Before you decide, remember that evidence remains outside public view, and it could reshape both narratives. The public lacks evidence that could settle this case's most important seconds. Investigators may hold doorbell footage, messages, forensic measurements, and Scott's recorded interview. The autopsy could clarify direction, range, and trajectory, while scene testing could establish each person's position. Messages could explain why Morton came, what he expected, and whether anyone planned secrecy. None allows you to declare Scott guilty or Morton deserving of death. Scott now prepares for her August 3 appearance while living outside jail under the court's conditions. That hearing may reveal how aggressively prosecutors defend first-degree murder and whether Ballin begins building a formal self-defense theory. It may also produce another delay, leaving the central dispute unresolved. Based only on the public evidence, what charge do you believe these facts actually support? Should prosecutors maintain first-degree murder, consider a lesser homicide charge, or dismiss the case under self-defense? Explain which single fact controls your answer, because that detail shows how you interpret the entire shooting. Subscribe and turn on notifications, because we will follow the verified developments after Scott returns to court. Do not let viral posts decide what unreleased evidence may eventually prove. For now, Scott's statement remains both her emotional defense and the prosecution's challenge. She said she did what she had to do. The next evidence must decide whether Tennessee law agrees.
That's correct. And Tennessee has no self-defense law or any of that kind of thing, unless, you kill you unalive anyone outside your home, that's considered murder. Now, if she had, caught him inside the house, it would have been different. She would have got a probably little involuntary little manslaughter charge and let go. She probably wouldn't even been charged in her house because that would have been a passion crime. But anyway, let's get on with it and find out about this kid. Well, he's not a kid, he's a grown man. When you turn 20, you're a grown man. You have no business around any children under age. But anyway, let's get back to this and see what's going on with this alleged minor.
This shooting took place here at around 1:40 a.m. and it happened at this home right across from me on Travis Road. Now, this all happened after a mother found a man in her house. She says he was hiding under a child's bed.
As your parent, you're protecting. And when a situation comes up like that, you just react. If someone came into your home and they weren't supposed to be there and they was running out and the law has been changed, when you shoot, you don't know where the bullet gonna hit.
A young man lying motionless in the grass, his belongings scattered around him as if he had been rushing to leave. A mother standing on the property, calmly and repeatedly telling officers she had simply protected her home. By the time investigators finished their first hour on scene, they knew this wasn't what it looked like. And the harder they looked, the more the arrangement started working against the person who built it. This is the story of Rodarius Morton and the self-defense narrative that was never as convincing as Kendra Scott thought. Born in 2006, Rodarius Morton was navigating the chaotic, often overwhelming transition from teenager to young adult in Memphis, Tennessee. At 20 years old, he was exactly at that precarious age where the law recognizes you as an adult, but the brain's prefrontal cortex, the center of risk assessment and long-term consequence, is still years away from fully developing. Memphis is a city with a heavy pulse. It is a place rich in culture and community, but it is also a city where violent crime statistics consistently remind residents that safety is a fragile illusion. Growing up here requires a certain level of street smarts, a defensive posture, and an understanding of where you belong and where you don't. Rodarius was known to his peers as someone who was just trying to find his footing. Because this remains part of an active case, detailed public statements from his immediate family regarding his career ambitions or specific job history have not yet been released. But the portrait painted by those who knew of him was standard for a 20-year-old. He was focused on his social life, his connections, and living in the moment. To understand the victimology here is to understand the invincibility complex of a 20-year-old man. At that age, you don't think about the worst-case scenario. You don't think about the legal definitions of trespassing, or the castle doctrine, or the terrifying reality of civilian firearms in a heavily armed state. You think about the thrill of a late-night text. You think about sneaking around. You think you are faster, smarter, and luckier than you actually are. Rodarius didn't have a long, hardened criminal record that would suggest he was a danger to the community. He was simply a young man making what he likely thought was a harmless, if reckless, social decision. But in the early hours of a sweltering July morning, that single reckless decision was about to intersect with a deeply guarded, volatile household. Rodarius was about to step into an environment where the rules were not governed by the state, but by a mother who had already drawn a lethal line in the sand. Welcome to Dark Truth Files. We are about to look at one of the most hotly debated stand your ground cases of the year. If you're new here, subscribe and hit that like button and drop a comment letting us know where you're watching from. We read every single one. Just a few miles away in the Walker Homes neighborhood, 36-year-old Kendra Scott ran her household in the 3000 block of Travis Road. By all outward appearances, it was a standard, quiet Memphis home. But inside, the psychological environment was highly controlled, simmering with a heavy protective tension. Kendra was a mother to a 13-year-old daughter. The transition from childhood to adolescence is difficult in the best of circumstances, but raising a teenage girl in a city with high crime rates often pushes parental protection into overdrive. Kendra was fiercely protective, a trait that, in a vacuum, is universally praised. The mama bear instinct is practically a cultural religion. Society expects mothers to do whatever it takes to shield their children from the dangers of the outside world. But protection can easily bleed into paranoia, and discipline can easily warp into dangerous ultimatums. The dynamic between Kendra and her daughter was fraught with the typical push and pull of a teenager testing boundaries and a mother slamming them shut. However, Kendra's boundaries were not enforced with groundings or confiscated cell phones. They were enforced with the threat of lethal violence. According to the investigative timeline, tension in the house had been mounting in the weeks leading up to July. Kendra suspected her daughter was communicating with boys, a violation of the strict rules of the Travis Road house. But Kendra didn't just give a stern warning. She made a specific, terrifying promise. She sat her young daughter down and told her in no uncertain terms that if she ever caught a boy inside their home, she would put a hole in his A. This wasn't a casual, off-the-cuff remark made in passing. It was a stated policy, a premeditated rule of engagement. For the 13-year-old girl, the home ceased to be a safe haven and became a powder keg. She knew the firearm was real. She knew her mother's temper was real. But the rebellious nature of a teenager is a powerful, blinding force. The daughter had made a connection with 20-year-old Rodarius Morton. The inappropriate age gap, a 20-year-old adult engaging with a 13-year-old middle schooler, is a glaring red flag that paints Rodarius' choices in a highly critical light. It was a connection that never should have happened, a profound error in judgment on his part that set the stage for disaster. As the heat of mid-July settled over Memphis, the digital communication between the adult man and the juvenile girl continued in secret. They were coordinating, planning, waiting for the perfect window of opportunity when the ultimate enforcer of the house was gone. The 15th of July, 2026, bled into the early, dark hours of July 16. Kendra Scott was out of the house for the 13-year-old daughter. This was the green light. The texts were sent, the back door was left unlocked. At approximately 1 a.m., Rodarius Morton slipped quietly onto the property at Travis Road. He moved through the shadows of the yard, pulling open the door and stepping into the dark house. He was trespassing, yes. He was crossing a moral and legal line by entering the home to see a juvenile, absolutely. But in his mind, he was a guest, an invited secret. He brought his personal belongings with him, settling into the bedroom, completely unaware that he had just triggered a countdown clock. For 30 minutes, the house remained quiet. The secret seemed secure. Then, at 1:30 a.m., the sound of a vehicle pulling up shattered the silence. Footsteps approached the house. Not the soft, hesitant footsteps of someone returning late, but heavy, authoritative steps. It was Kendra, and she knew something was wrong. Instead of unlocking the door and walking in, Kendra began banging aggressively on the exterior. Her voice cut through the quiet night, loud and demanding. "Who's at my house?" she yelled. Inside the bedroom, sheer panic erupted. The adrenaline spike in Rodarius's system must have been blinding. He was a grown man, but in that moment, he was trapped in a nightmare scenario. There was no time to run out the back. There was no time to explain. The 13-year-old girl, remembering her mother's lethal promise, was terrified. Rodarius scrambled. In a desperate, frantic bid for survival, the 20-year-old squeezed his frame underneath the child's bed. He lay there in the dark, barely breathing, surrounded by dust and the pounding rhythm of his own heart, listening as the front door opened. He listened as Kendra's footsteps moved through the house. He listened as she searched. He listened as the footsteps entered the bedroom. And then the hiding spot was compromised. Kendra found him. We do not know the exact words exchanged in those terrifying seconds. The specific dialogue remains part of an active case. But we know the immediate aftermath. We know Kendra began yelling at him to get out. Rodarius didn't fight. He didn't argue. He didn't lunge. He dragged himself out from under the bed, grabbed his belongings, and began to rapidly retreat through the house, desperate to put distance between himself and the furious mother. He made it out of the bedroom. He made it to the threshold of the home. He made it out the door. But Kendra Scott wasn't just clearing her house. She was keeping her promise. At roughly 1:45 a.m., the Memphis Police Department dispatch board lit up. Calls were flooding in from the 3000 block of Travis Road, reporting the loud, unmistakable crack of a single gunshot. When the first patrol cruisers turned onto the street, sweeping their spotlights across the lawns, they didn't find a chaotic, active shooter situation. They found a scene that was chillingly static. Rodarius Morton was lying in the front yard near the porch. He was bleeding profusely from a catastrophic head wound. Surrounding his body were the personal belongings he had frantically gathered just moments before. He was entirely unresponsive. Paramedics rushed to his side, but the damage was absolute. Rodarius Morton, at 20 years old, was pronounced dead at the scene. Standing nearby was Kendra Scott. When officers approach a homicide scene, they are trained to read the baseline behavior of the suspects and witnesses. People in legitimate, traumatizing self-defense situations are usually hysterical, shaking, or in a state of profound shock. They are begging for help. They are asking if the person is alive. Kendra Scott was none of these things. She was resolute. She was justified in her own mind. As officers secured the perimeter and approached her, she did not ask for an attorney. She did not remain silent. She looked at the police and delivered a confession that she believed completely exonerated her. "I saw a dude under my kid's bed," Kendra reportedly told the officers, her voice steady, "and I did what I had to do." Other witnesses in the immediate vicinity corroborated her demeanor, telling police they heard Kendra stating, I shot him, not as a confession of murder, but as a declaration of a mother's defensive victory. To the untrained eye, it was an open and shut case of the castle doctrine. A mother comes home in the middle of the night. She finds an adult male intruder hiding under her young daughter's bed. Fearing for her life and the life of her child, she exercises her Second Amendment right and neutralizes the threat. It was the ultimate mama bear narrative, a story that would play well on the evening news, a story that would generate immense public sympathy. But crime scene investigators do not listen to narratives. They listen to the physics of blood, the trajectory of bullets, and the geography of the dead. And as the forensic team cordoned off the front yard, the physical evidence began screaming a very different story. The unraveling of Kendra Scott's self-defense claim didn't take weeks, it took minutes. The first massive contradiction was the location of the body. If Kendra had shot an intruder who lunged at her from under the bed, the body, the blood pooling, and the ballistic evidence would be confined to the bedroom. But the bedroom was clean. Rodarius Morton wasn't shot inside the house. He was shot outside on the porch front yard area. This geographical shift is massive in the eyes of the law. Under Tennessee law, the Castle Doctrine allows a homeowner to use deadly force against someone who unlawfully and forcibly enters their residence, provided there is a reasonable fear of imminent peril of death or serious bodily injury, but the key word is imminent. When an intruder turns their back, gathers their belongings, and begins to exit the property, they are actively retreating. They are no longer an imminent threat. They are a fleeing suspect. And unless that fleeing suspect poses a direct, immediate threat to others, like actively firing a weapon backward while running, a civilian cannot legally use lethal force to stop them. You cannot shoot someone simply for the crime of having been in your house. The second contradiction was the victim's posture. When the medical examiner's investigator examined Rodarius's body on the lawn, they documented the fatal wound. It was a single gunshot, but it wasn't to the chest. It wasn't to the face. It was to the back of the head. Rodarius Morton was facing entirely away from Kendra Scott when she pulled the trigger. He was walking away. He was complying with her orders to get out. The third and final devastating blow to the self-defense narrative came when investigators thoroughly searched Rodarius's body and the scattered belongings around him. They patted down his pockets. They checked his bags. They found absolutely nothing. Rodarius Morton was completely unarmed. Investigators now had a clear forensic timeline. An unarmed man was caught trespassing. He was ordered to leave. He complied, turned his back, walked out the front door, and as he was exiting the property, the homeowner raised a firearm, aimed at the back of his head, and executed him. That is not self-defense. That is retaliation. But the police needed more than just forensic contradictions to elevate the charges. They needed to understand the suspect's mindset. To do that, they had to gently interview the most traumatized witness on the scene, Kendra's 13-year-old daughter. Sitting with child advocacy investigators, the young girl broke down the reality of the Travis Road home. She admitted that she was the one who had invited Rodarius over. She admitted he was hiding because they heard Kendra banging on the door. And then she gave investigators the final, chilling piece of the puzzle. She told them about the promise. She recounted how her mother had explicitly warned her prior to this night that she would put a hole in his A if she ever caught a boy in the house. For prosecutors, this statement was the holy grail of a homicide investigation. It proved that the shooting was not a spontaneous, split-second reaction to sudden fear. It was the fulfillment of a premeditated threat. Kendra Scott had already decided she was going to kill whoever she found in that house long before she ever pulled into the driveway on July 16. The psychological profile of Kendra Scott shifted rapidly in the eyes of law enforcement. She wasn't a terrified mother reacting to an unknown threat. She was an enraged disciplinarian acting as judge, jury, and executioner. She saw red, followed a retreating, compliant man out of her house, and shot him in the back of the head to prove a point. She could have held him at gunpoint. She could have locked the door behind him and called. Instead, she chose the trigger. Before the sun even rose over Memphis on the morning of the 16th of July, 2026, the illusion of the justified homeowner was entirely shattered. Kendra Scott was placed in handcuffs on her front lawn. She was transported to the Shelby County Jail, where the reality of her actions began to set in. Based on the overwhelming physical evidence, the location of the body, the back of the head entry wound, and the daughter's statement regarding prior threats, prosecutors did not hold back. Kendra Scott was officially charged with first-degree murder, along with a secondary charge of employing a firearm during the commission of a dangerous felony. Because of the severity of the premeditated murder charge, she was arraigned and ordered to be held without bond. As the news of the arrest hit the Memphis airwaves and spread like wildfire across X and Facebook, the public reaction was instantaneous and fiercely divided. The case tapped into a raw, volatile nerve regarding parental rights, gun ownership, and the value of human life. On one side of the digital divide, thousands of users rallied behind the Mama Bear defense, arguing that a 20-year-old man sneaking into a 13-year-old's bedroom forfeits his right to safety. They argued that the trauma of finding a grown man under a child's bed justifies any subsequent action, legal or not. On the other side, legal analysts and horrified community members pointed to the cold, hard facts of the autopsy. You cannot shoot an unarmed, retreating person in the back of the head. It is a fundamental violation of both the law and basic human morality. While Rodarius's presence in the home was incredibly inappropriate and legally actionable, it did not carry a legal death penalty, especially not one carried out in the front yard as he tried to leave. Today, Kendra Scott sits in a Shelby County jail cell awaiting trial. Her defense team will undoubtedly face an uphill battle, likely trying to suppress the daughter's statements or pivot to an extreme heat of passion defense to get the first-degree murder charge reduced to manslaughter. But in the wake of the legal maneuvering, the absolute devastation left behind cannot be quantified. 2 families have been utterly destroyed by the events of a single hour. Rodarius Morton's family is left to mourn a 20-year-old who made a terrible mistake that cost him his life. Kendra Scott has effectively orphaned her own child, trading her freedom for a moment of vigilante justice. And a 13-year-old girl is left to navigate the rest of her life, carrying the unimaginable trauma of a fatal secret, a bloody front porch, and the echo of a mother's broken promise.
Well, I'm going to tell you something. Kids can get you caught up in so much, man. You know what I'm saying? You have to pay attention to what you do and who you do it with. Okay? This 20-year-old kid, he knew he was 20 years old. And he knew this little girl was 13. You can look at him he looks about like he's a little young kid, but he's a grown man. He has no business even consulting with that. Now, the mom, on the other hand, she should have took things to the other level, like contacting the police, held him there till the police came, okay, and had him arrested the right way. You know what I'm saying? Because she had him in her house. All she had to do was have the police there. Just keep him there till the police got there. And they would have took care of that business properly. And he would have been back that way, still alive, in jail, finna do some time. And she would have been out here with her daughter, taking care of her, making sure that her needs are met, making sure that she doesn't do this thing again with some other man. Now she's in the system, and the system in Memphis does not care about your children. Memphis, once they hit these streets of Memphis, these kids get out here and they get into the system of Memphis, it's over with. I had a couple of cousins got caught up in that system, man, and it was over with for them. You know what I'm saying? But what I'm saying is, man, we have to watch our children, man. Make sure that we take care of them and do the thing that's proper as parents. Show them the right way so that they will go the right way. Okay, this Fearen Fear Files, once again, I brought you these episodes to show that there's a lot of things going on in this city, man, that's, hidden. I'm going to bring some more on the next video, okay? And Fearen Fear Files, signing out once again, baby. Peace.